videos, and then that way we can be in position. And then Nitsan, when I turn it over to you, everyone come on in. Everyone come on in.
That was an echo from the video. All right. We're still good. We'll start probably 3:01.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at day 3 of From Classroom to Boardroom, a virtual event series addressing issues of race and equity in the workplace and communities across the country. We are excited for today's session, The Clean Energy Industry, Lessons in Diversity and Equity, presented in partnership with our good friends at Sun Tribe. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Nitsan Goldberg, Director of Policy and Business Development of Brego. Nitsan, we'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you to the Tom Tom Foundation for the opportunity to moderate this great panel. It's a great privilege to be on a panel with such distinguished speakers, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. We have about 45 minutes, and we'll break it up into 3 sections. As Miles mentioned, this is the Clean Energy Industry, Lessons in Diversity and Equity. So what we'll do is break up our conversation, and we're going to have a dynamic conversation between all the speakers. We're going to be talking first about where we are in the clean energy industry in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we'll move into a conversation about where we'd like to get, what our end goal is, what we need to get. And then we'll wrap it up with a discussion of how we can go about doing that and what kinds of actions we need to take in terms of organizations and companies to actually reach our end goal. We'll leave some time at the end for questions, but please do go ahead and submit those questions in the chat as the conversation unfolds, and I'll try and fold them in to the conversation so that we can have a dynamic interaction with you all, despite this being a virtual conference. So I'd like the speakers to give us a quick introduction of themselves before we get started in the conversations. So I'd ask all the speakers to join me. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and ask Miles Braxton for an introduction. If you could introduce yourself to the panel, to this conference, please.
It would help to go off of mute first. My name is Miles Braxton. I work as the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Black Oak Collective, and also as one of its co-founders. And the Black Oak Collective is a network of Black professionals and advocates dedicated to sustainability, dedicated to the advancement of, I guess, accentuating that change. So that's a little bit about me. And full-time, I lead risk management for the Goldman Sachs Renewable Power Group.
Thank you, Miles. All right, Walter McLeod, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Walter McLeod, and thank you for having me here today. I'm a board member of CHESA, which is the regional voice for the solar and storage industry, along with Nitsan. So I'm glad to be in good company with her today. I'm also going to be speaking on behalf of a group called Black Owners of Solar Services, BOSS, which is a newly founded national group that looks to raise the voice for a collective group of African-American business owners in the space. But my day job is managing a group called VSF Solar. It's a partnership that I'm a co-owner of, and we focus on utility scale and commercial solar plus storage here in Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic region.
Thank you, Walter. Rachel Smucker, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Smucker, and I serve as the Mid-Atlantic Regulatory Affairs and Policy Associate for Clean Choice Energy. Many of you may know me best under my former role at the Regional Solar Trade Association, CHESA. I am really excited to be here today, especially to sit amongst two of my mentors and some of my favorite people in the industry, Walter and Nitsan. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Rachel. And last but not least, Ryan Tully, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Nitsan. I'm Ryan Tully. I'm the VP of Operations at Suntron, and we are proud to be partnering again with the TomTom Foundation. We're one of the fastest growing clean energy companies and #1 provider of on-site solar for public institutions in Virginia, which we're very proud of. We're located right here in Charlottesville along with TomTom. And I am just extremely grateful to be included on this panel and really excited to be here with my colleagues and hear about their perspectives.
Thank you all. This should be a really fun conversation. So let's just get right to it. You know, this is one of the panels that's really supposed to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but specifically in the clean energy industry. So either on a national level or a local level, I'd love the panelists to talk a little bit about where you think we are in terms of our track record to date on making sure to drive best practices and actually succeeding on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our sector. Just wanted to get everybody on the same page about where we think we are today. This could very much maybe I might even just ask Rachel to get us started with some statistics. I know that you have some ideas in terms of just grounding ourselves in metrics, but I ask all the panelists to jump in and provide your thoughts on where we are as an industry. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Nitsan. So I'll speak just from the perspective of the solar industry. The Solar Foundation, in partnership with our National Solar Trade Association, SEIA, produced a report 2 years ago that took an in-depth look at diversity and inclusion and equity within the solar industry. And it found that a majority of the solar industry workforce is white and male. And amongst senior executives, that trend continues. 88% are white and 80% are male. And this obviously translates into financial outcomes. The report also found that women in solar make 74 cents on the dollar compared to men. And when it comes to tracking this data, just 36% of solar companies formally track employee demographics and diversity. and even less have a plan to increase representation of people of color and women within their organizations. So when we're looking at this data, we clearly have a lot of work to do as an industry to ensure that our workforce is truly reflective of not only the racial and ethnic diversity in this country, but also represents the gender diversity, sexual orientation diversity, religious identity, and the list goes on. We have this data that comes out of these reports, but who is actually talking about it? And panels like today, I think, are super important to set the stage for these ongoing conversations. And I hope that we all have something we can take away from this conversation at the end of the day, and that we take that nugget with us and do something about it.
And I'm happy to chime in. I think Rachel hit it right on the head with the SIA statistics. And, I think there is a lot of room for improvement, but that's also a good thing, we see an upward trajectory. And I think specifically within clean energy, I think the awareness is very realized in that this is an issue, given that, there are a lot of progressive qualities that come with working in clean energy and advocating for its deployment and financing. So, this is something that a lot of companies are looking at, and a lot of companies are focusing on, and a lot of companies are taking a step back to look at, the workforce that they're employing, their employers, and saying, okay, something needs to change in this picture, because we can't be the best company that, we can be with, all white males or, this current demographic in our company. So I think, step one is realizing that there is an issue, because a lot of industries don't realize that there's an issue with their diversity and inclusion. And then, taking the necessary steps and putting the time in to actually put forward initiatives, and work with partners that are focusing on these initiatives to help solve those problems. So I think, the awareness is very high, and now it's, what are we doing about it? What are we implementing to get there?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Appreciate the comments from both Rachel and Miles, and I would agree that, there's certainly, quite a bit of work to be done, but just looking at the scale of the opportunity that's in front of us, the clean energy industry is, still in relatively nascent stages of development. It is a young industry. Awareness is, very high on these issues. I think it's just incredibly important for us to recognize that this is an opportunity to enact real societal change. Speaking, solely for the solar industry, which employs, looking at that SIA study, around 250,000 people in the U.S. I mean, that's expected to quadruple, by 2030. And so when you just look at the scale of this transition, not only do we have the opportunity to enact real change in terms of helping solve climate change, but also addressing some of these issues of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I'd like to just echo a lot of the same thoughts of the panelists. Those are sobering statistics, Rachel, and they're kind of bookended by some statistics from that NREL put out a couple of years ago, examining the LMI community, because the flip side of this is, companies are challenged to represent diverse employees and diversity from the top to the bottom, but also the customers they serve. Are they reaching out to those diverse communities? And we're not seeing that either. So it's a two-end problem that I think is going to have to be addressed by leadership. It starts at the top, and as you start to see that kind of commitment at the board level, then you'll start to see change both within the company in terms of identifying all equitable markets and opening up workforce opportunities.
That's a great point. How are we doing? Can I ask? It sounds like not a lot of companies are collecting the data, Rachel, right? How it seems like a big part of this is actually understanding the problem, and it sounds like there's more room to be more diligent about actually tracking ourselves and keeping ourselves accountable. That
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you think about it, data tracking is it can be one of the lower hanging fruits. It doesn't cost much to track your own data, and what you measure, you manage. Organizations should be actively tracking the demographics of their employees, their leaders, who's getting promoted. We can't identify our weaknesses without knowing and tracking where we currently stand. And so this is an area of opportunity for the industry, and something that doesn't cost a lot of money to implement.
wonderful. Yeah. And so, I mean, you have trade association background, so I'm sure you've experienced having to hound companies for data. And so there's the tracking the data and being responsive to the organizations that are reaching out to you, right? That it sounds like much more work could be done there on the company's part. All right. Well, I think we've had a sobering and grounding reflection of where we stand today. Let's go to the fun part, which is what is our end goal? How do you all see a clean energy industry that is just acing diversity, equity, and inclusion? What does that look like? What's the end state in your mind?
Yeah, happy to touch on this. I think there's a multi-pronged approach that we can take in order to, I guess, elevate D&I within the industry. I think my vision for a more diverse, inclusive industry means that we're not only hitting from the recruitment and retention aspects of getting people in the door and keeping them in our companies, but also helping to educate students, interested, people who may not, necessarily know what clean energy is, or just may have a very limited understanding of how the industry works, using our resources to, put out educational materials in, just the direction that our industry is going and why someone will want to get involved, especially someone of color. And then two, engaging the communities we're in as well. We're pouring, millions of dollars into, certain communities, a lot. If you look at a lot of utility scale, specifically in large commercial and industrial scale solar, a lot of those are being built in in places where the cost of land is lower. So, typically lower to moderate income communities or rural communities that typically have a higher percentage of people of color. So, what are we doing to educate them, to help them know what's going on in their communities with these projects that we're building? I'm sure there's room in the budget where we can allocate certain scholarships, given that project to a school district nearby. So I just think that the opportunities are endless, and it'd be, it's not my place to say this is what D&I looks like at the, once we've reached the pinnacle of DEI in clean energy. But I think, we can get to whatever that pinnacle is by pushing the envelope in different areas in different ways.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Miles. Speaking just on behalf of the SunTribe and the businesses in the industry, just broadly speaking, I think it's important to we recognize that the impact of our work is felt across the entire community, really across the entire economy. And that our vision of success, it's not enough for us to make the transition to a clean energy future. It's really not enough for only companies like SunTribe, for example, that are at the center of this transition to be successful. But as Walter mentioned earlier, it's the entire ecosystem that we're trying to lift up. And our vision of success is to continue to build a successful, thriving industry. But the only way that happens is by leveraging all the different members of the community. We're talking about all the different stakeholders, from employees to customers, our suppliers, and the cities and communities in which we are, building projects in which we are working. So I think there's a lot that can be done by organizations, but I think it starts with taking that broader vision of success, which I think Miles alluded to.
Yeah, I want to agree with both of your comments. Very well said. Going back to a thought I mentioned earlier about it starting at the top, I really do think that clean tech, it gives us an opportunity because it is a young industry, to really do it right. To not end up in a legacy position like those statistics that Rachel read out. We don't have to stay there. So we really need to see a concerted effort by the industry to look more like the country, and in the boardroom, in the C-suite, in the managerial positions, all the way down, as well as to the customers that we serve. And I think one of the ways we get there too is we create innovative teaming opportunities. And when you do that, especially when you bring diversity into the leadership of your organization, then this question about, where are these talent pipelines coming from? How do we find these people? That question is answered because you have people sitting next to you who are tapped into those talent pools. Whether they be minorities or women, or whatever you need to sort of make your company look more like the country. So you really need to sort of start there and make your company over and rethink what it means to be, either shareholder focused or stakeholder focused.
And I'll build off of that, talking a little bit more about work culture and work environment, because this is one area, as Walter said, where organizations can have a really big impact on furthering DEI within their ecosystem by creating spaces where everyone feels safe, comfortable, empowered. We open up the opportunity for people to express themselves authentically. And monocultures can really prohibit or suppress this authentic expression. I'll take this one step further and say this bluntly. Historically and presently, white people have created really harmful spaces for communities of color. And I think we as an industry need to acknowledge this and evaluate how our work cultures are and our workspaces are either perpetuating this cycle or breaking the cycle. And if our work environments aren't passing that test, then I think it's imperative companies invest time and resources into transforming that environment into becoming more inclusive and equitable, and really putting our money where our mouth is with that.
Well said, Rachel. So I think I'm hearing you all say that we have to fix this before we scale up, so that we're scaling up right and we're becoming the big industry in a way that's more reflective of what we want. So now's the time. And then I'm also hearing Walter mention the idea that if we work on making sure our company has diversity, equity, and inclusion, there should be a nice synergy between the diversity of our customer base as well, and a feedback loop between that, so that at the end, we not only have DEI inside our company, but our customer base looks more like our company because there's a feedback loop there. So that's part of our end goal as well. It's not just us, but also our customers. All right, well, let's talk brass tacks. Let's talk about how we get there. Would love to really dive in with you all in the next 15 or 10 minutes or so, just on how we do it. What kind of hiring best practices, retention, promotion best practices do we see happening? What kind of initiatives? I think innovative teaming opportunities you mentioned, I think it was Walter. But I'd love to unpack a little bit of the strategy for how we get there, so that our attendees can take away some good ideas on what they need to do to incorporate into their business best practices.
Well, I can start this time since I've had the benefit of bouncing off other people's thoughts up to this point. Yeah, I think it's key to benchmark. I'm one of those people that believes that what gets measured gets done. So, you have what SIA, for example, did with the Solar Foundation was great. That's a good start, and more companies can do that on an annual basis. Just start to benchmark yourselves and start to benchmark, your customer and maybe your value chain. And you're seeing more emphasis on that as ESG is becoming a more prominent part of how companies are evaluating themselves, at least public companies. and Miles can probably speak to that, working in the investment banking side. But you definitely need to know the numbers if you're going to make progress. Otherwise, you can squish around the facts, or there are no facts, right? So benchmarking is key, and we just need to sort of agree to what those metrics are going to be.
Yeah, I'll say, I think one thing, going back to the industry, maybe a reason to be hopeful is, I think one thing this industry does well is face these types of challenges collaboratively. I think we all agree that, especially in this area, rising tide lifts all boats. This is an area that, we don't have to compete in. And by bringing more diverse members of the community into the industry, we're all going to benefit. And so I think about an initiative like Renewables Forward, which I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with, but it's essentially a collection of industry leaders who have joined together to share best practices and, really try to enact meaningful change from the top down, like Walter was saying. And one of the outputs from that group recently was to publish a DEI playbook that was specifically for HR managers and business unit leaders, and really covers some of the tactics around recruiting and hiring and retention. And it has been a really useful resource. But I think, we have a responsibility as organizations, to make sure that these lessons are being shared with all members of the industry, because like I said, it's going to benefit all of us.
Yeah, and I love what Rachel hit on the last question in terms of just taking a step back and seeing what does your company culture actually look like, and how is that, what perspectives or what, I don't want to use a colloquial term here, but what vibes are you giving off? Is that an environment where someone being the only whatever different, differentiator in the group will want to stay and work in. And I think, that's from a retention aspect. And then, are you compensating that person equally compared to their white male peers, just to be direct? I think, that's something that, can be measured. That's easily comparable, from an HR lens, and something that can help with retention, just paying people equally. Doesn't necessarily have to be, more or offering these crazy packages, but just equal pay and compensation. And then from a recruiting lens, I had mentioned the education aspect, and then, targeting, working with certain networking groups to target certain audiences, whether that's a Black Oak Collective or a National Society of Black Engineers, or the Black Commerce Network. I think there's a bunch of different professional affinity groups that, have capable, qualified employees within their networks, that I think, we can utilize more as an industry, to really accentuate what the change that we want to see. Yeah, I'll leave it there and pass it back to Rachel.
Yeah, and I think, all my fellow panelists hit on this. The fact that the most impactful change is going to come from companies ensuring that DEI is incorporated into their strategic plan. It's part of the DNA. It's part of the mission and vision. And that's really what's going to drive real change when we're starting from the ground up. A couple other best practices that come to mind: establishing employee resource groups for specific groups of people. And these groups can include allies or advocates, but having that space created for specific groups. And, there should be some level of funding associated with that for organized happy hours, or DEI related conferences, things like that. Again, it's about putting our money where our mouth is. Another best practice is actively mitigating bias within the organization. If there is bias, and what resources are you providing your employees to ensure that they are educated on implicit bias and how that shapes our own lenses and our daily experiences.
Wonderful. Sorry, I have some background noise over here, but I wonder if you all can talk a little bit about how organizations, what the dynamic between organizations and companies should be to drive this change. Is it a productive, collaborative one? Is it, one of competition? How do we think about organizations and where they fit into this world of getting companies to start getting to our end goal that we've articulated?
I can start off with this one and speak from my trade association background. Industry trade associations can play a really big role in furthering DEI within the larger ecosystem, whether that's being vocal about where they stand on a specific issue, elevating key voices within the industry, facilitating dialogue amongst industry players, establishing best practices for DEI and DEI pledges. There's really so much that can be done here. And as with anything that you are prioritizing, these initiatives should come with meaningful investment through dollars, time, and other resources.
Yeah, can I echo what Rachel's saying there? Because I watched her in action do a lot of this stuff my first year as a board member of CHESA. And I think we did more on DEI in that 1 year than I have seen as a member of CHESA in 10 years. So, I mean, it's just phenomenal when you have, it shows when you have people who actually buy in, who are pushing it, what can happen, right? And Rachel did a great job helping take our regional group to the next level. I did want to just point to one example of a trade association partnership that I know of that's really, I think, going to be groundbreaking in this area. SIA, Mother SIA, and BOSS, the group I mentioned earlier, Black Owners of Solar Services, have recently entered into an MOU, a national MOU. And so you're going to see an announcement officially of the details of it at SPI in September, but it's going to be tremendous. And I think that's a prototype of the kind of collaborations that you want to see, at least as a Black business owner who is in this space. With the broader industry, that strategically we can do it all. We can address the DEI issue, and we can all see the prosperity that's going to come as a result of decarbonizing our economy. So just a practical example of what's actually going on out there right now.
And I hate to press my own buttons on my trumpet.
Go ahead.
I think, the Black Oak Collective, I'd like to explain a little bit about what we're doing to help the industry from this lens. First, to answer the question, I think this is 100% should be a collaborative approach, between different companies, between different organizations, between student organizations, universities, and Black Oak is helping to facilitate that, and understanding that, each individual corporation is not going to, or corporate is not going to have their own, I guess, dedicated team or solution to these issues. And it's okay to seek outside help with people who have direct experience on this side of implementing diversity and being a voice and championing those voices of diversity. So, what Black Oak is doing is partnering with different corporate organizations and nonprofits in order to, our overall goal is to increase the number of Black employees in not only clean energy, but in sustainability and environmental fields in general. And how do we do that? We work with partners to post on our job board that's shared with our members and affiliates through our newsletter and social media as well. We're partnering with universities, HBCUs, PWIs, Ivy League universities, in order to build our membership and build our reach, so that we can bring in more talent into the industry who may not have, who may have the skill set, but may not know that there's a career in being a solar development engineer. And we've seen a lot of that. I think it's really easy, at least while I was in school, and this is kind of directly tying back to Charlottesville because I went to UVA. You saw a lot of people in finance, a lot of students in finance, and they were just focused on being investment bankers. And it's like, hey guys, that's not the only career option you have. And you can use those same skill sets that you're learning for, investment banking, and apply that to something probably a little more ethical in the clean energy industry, or in, environmental fields in general. I say that hypocritically now, working for an investment bank, but not an investment banker. So I just think there's a lot of opportunity, to push funding into educating the next generation of Black leaders in this space. And we're fortunate to have partners like Sun Tribe, who are helping facilitate that mission. So, I think there comes from, we're trying to hit this from an education standpoint, letting them know that, letting students and people in other career paths know that this is an industry that is looking for people like you, that you can excel in. And that's, probably has a lot more ethical benefits than whatever you're doing right now, or plan on doing. And then two, from both a recruitment and retention lens, we have kind of mid-career or even advanced career members that are sitting on, board of directors, and people who are, senior, on the executive team in their companies. And we want them to, be able to excel and keep pushing and keep having a voice in their company, as well as bringing in more Black voices, Black faces into those roles.
Thanks, Miles. Great point. I'm going to call, and we're going to go to Q&A after one last question. This is a bit of I'm calling an audible, but I feel like you guys will flow with me. So Borrego's really big on commits, and committing to something at the end of a meeting is what commits means to us. I don't know if that was obvious, but I think we just discussed a really long list of things and action items that people can take for the next 5 years. Can I ask you all to think about, we have people who are probably entry level, analysts or managers listening to this, mid-career folks, directors, and then C-suite folks hopefully will have access to this webinar. What should they commit to doing before the end of 2021? We talked about employee resource groups, different initiatives. Is there something in the next year and a half that someone walking away from this panel can think, okay, I can get that done? What would be that commit from your guys' perspective for someone? Or what's something small that we can bite off that can move us in the right direction?
I'll jump in first, and I think this is just something, it kind of touches on what Miles was just talking about, and didn't want to miss the opportunity to say that, we are very fortunate to be partnering with Miles and his team at Black Oak, but something that can be done on perhaps just an individual level is just simply expanding your network. And there's both on, from a potential employee perspective, but also from a hiring manager or business unit leader perspective, we can all take actions to proactively expand our personal and professional networks. I think statistically 3 out of 5 job placements happen as a result of personal and professional networks. And so there's a responsibility on both ends, from the perspective employee and the employer, to proactively expand those networks.
I'll jump in here. Data tracking. I think that's the easiest thing that you can implement tomorrow. I mean, today, there's still time in the workday. Track your data and make it available to your employees or your customers.
And to go off of that, one thing that was really beneficial that I saw kind of on the same tracking data. Also, I think it's important to track qualitative data and take surveys of your employees to see how they're actually feeling, because it's hard in the C-suite, especially being remote now, to just get a sense of what your team is dealing with on a personal level, how they're being treated in the office, or if there are certain things that are bothering them from a cultural standpoint on a day-to-day basis that you may not even know about. And I know when I was at Soul Systems, we did kind of a cultural survey and worked with a D&I consultant who put together the survey, and it was really revealing. And I think it only helped make the organization better. So without that data, there's no improvement. You're just you're staying stagnant in that regard. So I think that was really helpful for the company, and I could see that being implemented elsewhere as well.
Okay, I'll try to add something to all those great comments. Maybe a little bit of an expansion on what I heard Ryan say would be perhaps to step outside of your comfort zone. We're all used to sort of operating within a certain bandwidth that we can get our groove on and be productive in, but sometimes when it comes to D&I, we just have to step outside of that comfort space. And I think that you can do that a lot of ways. You can do that either by breaking bread. That's a good way of doing it with people, especially now that people are getting the vaccine. You might be able to do that. But find a way in the next year to maybe sit down and talk to somebody that doesn't look like you, or maybe that represents DEI to your company, and see how that all pans out. And if you do it over a meal, you'll probably end up being besties at the end.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so let's open it up to Q&A. I saw that there was one question already, but for the rest of the attendees, feel free to add your questions to the chat box. Are there examples of entrepreneurship or procurement programs that ensure projects and products are sourced from diverse-owned companies, i.e. Black-owned, especially within cities, states, projects, etc.? And I know, Walter, it looks like you may have answered that, so maybe I'll kick it off to you to just make sure all the attendees are aware of the resources.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things in the MOU that we have with SIA is we're going to partner, develop a database of these kinds of opportunities that really extend themselves to diverse suppliers, diverse business owners, minority business owners, Black owned, and others. And so, and the really good thing about that is, and I will reference, if anyone needs it, maybe I'll give it to you, Nitsan. We did a summit last fall with a fairly nice survey of 35 Black owned business owners of some of the challenges they face, some of the priorities they see. And it's really informative data. I'll share it with everybody on the committee. It helps to sort of analyze where the opportunities are and focus, where the teaming relationships can be best built. Because one of the biggest obstacles is access to capital for a lot of minority-owned companies, women-owned companies. And so, through the SIA partnership arrangement, we plan to address that with balance sheet sharing. So.
Any other thoughts from folks on procurement? I mean, we are seeing increasingly some requirements, but I'm curious if folks have any comments on that more broadly. All right, now I'll move on to the next question happily. What role can community education and consumer access expansion play in solar DEI initiatives?
Yeah, I'm happy to touch on that one. I think community engagement is in education is really important. I hit on the statistic that wasn't really a statistic, but more qualitative, that a lot of the large scale solar and clean energy projects that are built in rural, low to moderate income communities. So, and the stat to go along with that, or to challenge that, is actually low to moderate income communities and minorities pay 70% more for utilities than their white counterparts. So it's like, if these power producing facilities are in our communities, why aren't we necessarily reaping the same benefits off of this energy that's supposed to be cheaper? And I think a lot of that just comes with awareness of these projects, how to get involved in these community solar programs that are delivering cheaper electricity to all communities across across state lines, across county lines, and just getting involved in certain programs. And I think putting kind of just helping educate the community on this will not only help, hopefully minority communities save money on electricity by getting involved in certain rebates, certain community solar programs, but also educate them so when, they're being educated on a formal scale, that they know that, hey, clean energy or ocean conservation, whatever it is in sustainability, this is a career path, and this is something that I could do. This is how my mom, got electricity for 6 years. And this is, something that I can do to impact my community in the future. And just having that nugget could go a really long way into, building the future leaders of this industry.
Great comments, Miles. Anybody else have any thoughts to wrap up our panel for today? Any concluding parting gifts to the attendees?
Yeah, I'll just add in here as a closing thought. We all have a role to play in creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive industry and society. And that shouldn't be something that we shy away from. That's a challenge that we should step towards authentically, empathetically, and thoughtfully.
Perfectly said. Thank you, Rachel. All right, well, if this is a regular conference, I'd ask the audience to thank the panelists, but alas, we are virtual. But thank you all for joining me today. I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, and it was great to chat with you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nitsan, and thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tom. See you all later.
Thank all of you. It's been such a fantastic talk that we just had. Want to send a special shout out to Sun Tribe for bringing this panel together, really being the connective piece that reached out and said, hey, this is an important conversation to have. Rob Cordry in the audience and Summer Rain, who we've worked with behind the scenes, did a great job in putting this together. And they said, look, we have the best and the brightest in the industry. We need to have them here having this conversation. So once again, thank you. Thank you to all of our attendees. And we have more sessions coming tomorrow. So tune in, and we look forward to continuing to have these important discussions.